Mr. President, I ask consent to engage in a colloquy until about 3:40 with Democrats and Republicans that are going to show up down here. I think Senator Vitter, Senator Inhofe, Senator Whitehouse, Senator Manchin, and we may have others that are here. So I see my good friend Senator Inhofe is here. Senator Inhofe, we're now beginning, and Senator Whitehouse is here. So if you would like to jump in with your statement, that would be great at this point. We have. Let
me ask first, is there an objection to the unanimous consent request?
Please, yeah.
Without objection?
Thank you. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Let me first mention that you don't see many things around this chamber that are truly bipartisan. And you're about to hear about one now. And I have to give credit to the senator from New Mexico and the great job that he has done in making this a possibility that we're even talking about this now. I am very honored to be the chairman of the committee called the Environment and Public Works Committee. And we do a lot of significant things around in that committee. We just had passed out arguably the second most significant bill of the year, which would be the highway reauthorization bill, and others. So it's a very busy committee. However, the thing that we're concerned about today, and I want to talk about a little bit, is the bill that we have been working on for a long period of time. We had a great member, Frank Lautenberg, of the Senate for a number of years. He and I became good friends back when on this committee when Democrats were for 8 years were the majority party, and prior to that, we were a majority for a long time. And during that time frame, Frank Lautenberg and I became good friends. We had some things in common people were not aware of, and that is we both came from the corporate world where we were involved in doing things together and looking at things through a corporate mind. But on this bill that we're talking about now, it's one that we're enjoying 60 co-sponsors. I want to mention that Bonnie Lautenberg is in the gallery today. She has been so cooperative. If you could single out one legacy of the great Frank Lautenberg, it'd be this bill. I can remember calling up Bonnie and asking if she'd be willing to come and testify before the committee. And this is some time ago, and she was more enthusiastic than I really expected that she would be, and she's been a big help also. So anyway, we have something really good that is going on. It's great to see so many of my colleagues excited about TSCA reform, and specifically the Lautenberg bill, which now has overwhelming support on both sides of the aisle. For a long time, we've been very focused, and rightfully so, on the public health and environmental benefits of reforming this 39-year-old failed law. I know that a lot of my friends across the aisle who are here will continue talking about that today. So I wanted to take my time on the floor to tell you some of the benefits of TSCA reform that you might not be aware of from a Republican perspective. TSCA reform, in addition to providing greater protections for families in my state of Oklahoma and the rest of the country, can play a pivotal role in boosting our economy, creating well-paying American jobs, and creating regulatory certainty for businesses not only in the United States but across the world. Today, the U.S. chemical industry is experiencing a resurgence nobody had ever predicted. For years, the chemical manufacturing has been moving its way out of this country, reallocating in locating in places like China, Saudi Arabia, South America. And one of the reasons for this is that we had this antiquated bill, the law on the books, that made it very difficult for them to do and operate here in the United States. So we kind of got used to this. Everyone was leaving the United States because of that. Now they're coming back. The interesting thing is there are two reasons I'm going to mention to you in a minute why they're coming back and what it means to us economically. Well, the last few years, one thing has completely flipped the idea on its head that we were not going to be able to change the laws that are regulating the chemical industry. Natural gas liquids are the primary feedstock for chemical manufacturing in the United States. And due to the shale boom or the shale revolution, we're very sensitive to that in my state of Oklahoma. Natural gas production from companies like Continental Resources, Devon, Chesapeake Energy, all in my home state of Oklahoma. Manufacturers have an abundant and reliable source of natural gas for decades to come. Now, this provides the stability and certainty that manufacturers need to once again make major investments in the United States. And there's no better example of an industry reinvesting in this country because of our energy revolution than the chemical industry. As of this June, the chemical industry has announced 238 investment projects valued at $145 billion. Let me repeat that, $145 billion in new capital investments in the United States of America by the chemical industry, in large part due to American natural gas production. This investment is predicted to be responsible for over 700,000 new jobs, along with $293 billion in permanent new domestic economic output by 2023. And the benefits don't stop there. This investment is also predicted to lead to $21 billion in new federal, state, and local tax revenue in the next 8 years, and will lower our trade deficit by increasing our exports by nearly $30 billion by 2030. Now, right now, the U.S. chemical industry is capturing market share from around the world, and all of those facilities that packed up and moved to China and moved to the Middle East and moved to Western Europe are rushing back. You don't have to look any further than comments by folks like Anito Tajani, the European industry commissioner, who said, and this is a quote, he said, "When people choose whether to invest in Europe or the United States, what they think about most is the cost of energy. The loss of competitiveness is frightening." In North America, as a whole, chemicals and plastics production is predicted to double in the next 5 years, while it falls by a third in Europe. In other words, it'll go down by a third in Europe. At the same time, it doubles in the next 5 years here in the United States. Now, some of you may be wondering what this has to do with TSCA reform, because I'm talking about the cheaper price of energy. The main stock for chemicals is natural gas. Well, specifically the Lawton bill, and what we're talking about today. Let me tell you, passing this bill and getting TSCA reform signed into law not only provides these domestic industries with one manageable national rule book so products can be manufactured and distributed in all 50 states consistently, it also provides necessary regulatory certainty, the lack of which could be the one thing to drive this much-needed economic investment. Now, moreover, today, global chemical manufacturing and use, in the absence of a coherent and functioning United States chemical policy, is dominated by a European system called REACH. Now, I won't get into much detail about the European regulatory system, but it is significantly more burdensome and costly than many of our businesses can afford to deal with. And unfortunately, today it is the global standard. We benefit by enacting a meaningful U.S. chemical policy is setting our nation once again to be the world leader, not only in chemical manufacturing or manufacturing in general, but to set the global standard and how chemicals should be managed. Well, you know, that's what we're talking about. That's what this is all about. So there are two things that are bringing this industry back to the United States. One is our plentiful and cheap natural gas, and the other is this legislation. Can you imagine people anticipating that the legislation is going to pass and making corporate decisions, bringing back many, many jobs to the United States? So it's going to be a surge in economic benefit, and consequently, right now, the price of natural gas, the main feedstock that goes into chemical manufacturing, is far cheaper in this country than it is in Europe. So I think we're looking at, I say to my good friend who has really carried this ball, Senator Udall, that it's great that those two things are happening at the same time. And again, when I looked around at the press conference we had this morning, and we saw everyone ranging from the most liberal Democrats to the most conservative Republicans. That doesn't happen very often in Washington, D.C., and I think a lot of it is due to my good friend from New Mexico, who is, along with Senator Vitter, has been carrying this ball. With that, I would go ahead and vacate the floor and just ask for any comments.
Chairman Inhofe, thank you very much, and I just want to really thank you for your leadership. You're the chairman of the Environment and Public Works Committee, and I remember we came early on, Senator Vitter, myself, to you and said, you know, this bill, we've been working on it a couple of years and we think it's ready to go, but obviously it has to go through your committee. And you worked with us all the way along the line, and a lot of this has to do with your leadership and helping us with amending it in a way to keep making it bipartisan. And that's really been the history of this bill, is that it has grown. As you know, it passed your committee 15-5. And Chairman Inhofe, our next speaker, Senator Whitehouse, on your committee with you, I mean, he was able to work with you and 3 other members of the Environment and Public Works Committee to get the bill in the shape that we could then get it ready for the floor. And working with you, we've made a few additional tweaks and things, but I think it's ready to go, don't you?
Senator would yield, I just would observe the number of people who said when the bill first started out, there's a lot of opposition. There's opposition in our committee. And I think that a lot of the people on the committee were surprised when we passed it on a bipartisan basis. And then, of course, once it got down to the floor, we just, this is going to have a support from all corners. And again, yeah, it was a bipartisan effort, and it's one it's kind of rewarding to have that happen now and then. This is a good example.
This is a great example, and thank you so much. And once again, we couldn't have done this without your leadership. Your chairmanship of the Environment and Public Works Committee helped us shape this and helped us move in a bipartisan way. And I'm going to next ask Senator Whitehouse to talk a little bit because Senator Whitehouse has the ability and the experience of coming from a state, as a state official, a state former attorney general. He took a look at this bill. It was ready to go in front of the Environment and Public Works Committee. And he looked at it as a former AG. He looked at it in terms of the states being able to participate in enforcement and was able to help us craft a bill that could get out of committee 15-5. So, Senator Whitehouse, we really appreciate your help and your hard work on this. You did an amazing job. Any thoughts, comments about are we ready to go? Is this something that the Senate could take up and get done now in terms of where we have it right now?
Well, Mr. President, I would answer my colleague's question by saying I think we are very definitely ready to go, and we're particularly ready to go because of Senator Udall's achievement in securing the 60th vote, a filibuster-proof majority who are on this bill as co-sponsors. That doesn't count people who are willing to vote for it. I think we always had 60 people voting for it. But to have 60 people willing to co-sponsor it so that it's clear from the get-go that if this bill is called up, it will get through, I think that is very, very important. There was some dispute on the Environment and Public Works Committee. We had a very lively hearing, and I think the impact of that hearing caused people to go back and say, you know, we really do need to improve this bill in some ways. And I want to commend Senator Merkley and Senator Booker for joining me in I guess a little mini gang of 3 to pull the bill to a place where we would all support it in the committee. And that's part of how it got to 15-5. I think since then, what Senator Udall has been able to accomplish is that some of those 5 have now come over to join the 15. So to say that it's a 15-5 EPW committee-supported bill actually understates its support because of Senator Udall's continued work. There's one issue I want to make a particular point on, because I know both Senator Udall and I have served as attorneys general of our state. We take this question of a state, sovereign state's ability to defend its own citizens very importantly. And we both were attorneys general. We had the responsibility to very often lead for the state those public protection efforts. So we wanted to be very careful about making sure that there was a significant role for the states in this bill to look out for the health and the safety of their citizens. And what we came up with is a provision that I believe tracks very closely with the constitutional provisions that govern this. So a state is restricted from taking action here if it would unduly burden interstate commerce. Well, that's a statutory restriction, but guess what? As Senator Udall knows, that's also the constitutional restriction under the so-called Dormant Commerce Clause. So you weren't going to be able to move much further than that anyway. That is essentially the Commerce Clause written into legislative text. The next is if the action by the state would violate a federal law or a regulation. Well, there's another part of the Constitution called the Supremacy Clause, which says that when Congress has made a decision, the states can't overturn it. So once again, the restriction that we have on states coming to protect their citizens mirrors and matches a restriction that exists in the United States Constitution. The last piece says that if the state's going to regulate in this area, it has to be based on peer-reviewed science. Well, there's a third clause in the Constitution called the Due Process Clause. Under the Due Process Clause, a regulatory agency can't just willy-nilly regulate. If it does, its regulation can be challenged as being arbitrary and capricious. In order to meet the challenge that it's arbitrary and capricious, it has to be based on a sound factual foundation. And here, in the realm of science, that sound factual foundation is peer-reviewed scientific evidence. So as a former Attorney General, working with a former Attorney General, I think we are confident that where this bill is now gives our colleague Attorneys General the ability to have a very strong case to be made that they still have the authority to take action where their state has a real problem and people's health and safety is suffering and somebody needs to act, even if for some reason somebody at EPW won't. I'll close by saying this. This has been an education in legislating for me. I came out of being a prosecutor. I came out of being a executive official. I came out of being a staff person for a governor. I came out of being a practicing lawyer. But watching Senator Udall work has been instructive here because he won't say this, but I'm prepared to say that he co-sponsored this bill at a time when he didn't like it. I think he co-sponsored this bill at a time when what he saw wasn't that this is the bill I'm going to go with, but he saw that we need to fix TSCA. We need to have a bipartisan solution to this, and if it takes me signing up for a bill that I don't like as the opener to begin building that consensus that went first with Tom, then with Senator Carper coming on, then with our Merkley, Booker, Whitehouse contingent, and now most recently with Senators Durbin and Markey joining us, he has been the thread that has made all that possible. And so I just wanted to close by expressing a personal appreciation to him for hanging in there through particularly that early period when there was not a lot of support for this in our caucus, and working with us and working with Senator Inhofe and Senator Vitter to build the coalition that is made today and 60-plus co-sponsors possible. Congratulations to Senator Udall, and thanks for letting me say a few words.
Senator Whitehouse, thank you so much. And I just want to say about Senator Whitehouse, I mean, this bill would not be where it is today unless we had that trio working in the Environment and Public Works Committee. I really believe that. They took the bill that was coming up, we had a hearing on it, and they really looked and analyzed it and applied all the principles that Senator Whitehouse and I both talked about, and they came up with what was a very, very significant improvement. And so we're here today because of your hard work, and I've been very open. I think Senator Vitter's he's going to join us in a minute. Senator Vitter has been very open. Both of us have said, give us your ideas, give us your input, and we're going to take a look at it, and we get technical advice from the EPA, says, will this work? Because they're over there running this bureau. And so you should feel very good about moving it down the field to the point where we are today.
My only caution going forward is that for all the wonderful work that's been done by Senator Vitter and Senator Udall to pull us together, and for all the support that has been reached here, this is a fairly delicate compromise still. And we, first of all, have to figure out the procedural blockages and solve them that are preventing this from going through this chamber. And I would suggest that the majority party ought to be supporting the passage of legislation that is led by the majority party. It's the minority party's role to throw up objections and to make demands against legislation proceeding. So maybe not everybody on the other side has completely taken aboard that they're in the majority now. But I think that those blocks will be cleared and we'll have the chance to go forward. But then we've got to do something with the House. And either they have to pass something or they have to pass this, or we end up in conference. And I think it's really important that the record of this bill reflect that there is not a whole lot of wiggle room here for mischief to be accomplished between the House and the Senate. And my confidence here is that I really do think that the industry supports this bill. They've worked with it, they've worked with you, and so I don't think there's a huge incentive for mischief, but I think we do have to be on our guard that the spirit and the structure and the key points of this piece are preserved in anything that goes forward, because otherwise we're back to where we started with everybody back in their seats again.
And Senator Whitehouse, I couldn't agree more. I think those are the delicate phases we have to go through, and what I've been telling our House colleagues all along is that we've worked long and hard on this. We've been more comprehensive than they have, and so we need their patience to work through it with us, and that there's not a lot of room. I couldn't agree with you more that that's where we are today in terms of and I've got good relationships over there in the House. I served there 10 years, and Fred Upton and John Shimkus and Frank Pallone, they're all willing to work with us, and I feel that if we look at what our goal is here, is to protect the American public, to protect vulnerable populations, I think we can get this done.
While we have the floor, and until Senator Vitter comes, might it be a good time to say a kind word about our staffs? I know that during our process, our staffs worked enormously hard, and yours have been at this for a longer time than just that intense period of negotiation where we moved the bill in our section, but I defer to you to make those comments. But I would applaud your staff and Senator Vitter's, who've really been doing a terrific job.
I couldn't agree with you more, and I also want to talk a little bit about Senator Frank Lautenberg also, and have a picture here of him with his grandchildren. But let me first of all say about, and Senator Whitehouse, you want to mention your staff member that worked on this? That I know just spent time with Jonathan Black and with the whole team. We had a great team of staff members who are very goal-oriented and wanting to get things accomplished.
Well, my team was led by Emily Enderle, who leads my environmental team, and she has terrific credibility in the environmental community, and she knows these laws very well. But even with that, it was an enormously complicated task. This was a big bill, and I forget the number of changes we actually put into it in the course of that negotiation, but it was 20, 22. It was a big array of changes. So it was a lot of work in a short period of time, and she and your staff and everybody who was involved in that really dove in and worked hard in the best traditions of good staff work in the United States Senate, and with the intention to get to yes.
Thank you, Senator Whitehouse. Really appreciate your comments here today, and especially appreciate Senator Whitehouse's participation in terms of moving this forward in a bipartisan way. I worked with my staff diligently on this. I was lucky to have a chief of staff by the name of Mike Collins, who spent many hours working on this. My legislative director, Drew Wallace, worked on this. He's a lawyer by training. Jonathan Black was the legislative assistant with the main policy area. He's been with this all along, very even-handed and very good at dealing with other staff members and getting people to focus on the goal and not get into the arguments and not get sidetracked. So we've had, and I think this is true of the staff on the Republican side and the staff on the Democrat side, we've had tremendous support, and I expect that to go forward now when we start, if we can get floor time and get this out, and I believe the bill's ready to go. I think that we have the kind of staff effort in the House and the Senate that can resolve most of the major differences without too much problem. So that's what we're looking forward to. As I said earlier, I just wanted to say a few words. This is a picture here of Senator Frank Lautenberg and his grandchildren. And one of the things, I served on the Environment and Public Works Committee with Senator Lautenberg for a number of years. And there couldn't have been anything he was more passionate about than his grandchildren. And you saw that in his public work. Before I got onto the committee, Senator Lautenberg was a champion in terms of smoking and indoor smoking and tobacco smoke hurting people, and passed some significant legislation. And so it was particularly moving to me to hear him say, when he got on this compromise bill with Senator Vitter, he said he thought that bill, the Lautenberg-Vitter bill, would save more lives than all the work he'd done in the public health and environmental arena. And I know he said that to Bonnie Lautenberg, and that really hit all of us, that he saw the legislation, he saw how it was going to evolve, and he really believed that this would make a difference. And I saw this in Senator Lautenberg over and over again on the committee. Whenever an issue would come up, it didn't matter what issue it was, he always came back to his grandchildren. Are we doing the right thing by our children? So if we were looking at an infrastructure issue and the question was, how do we frame the best possible infrastructure package, he was looking out a couple of generations in the future and saying, are we going to pass on a better infrastructure system so we can grow jobs and do those kinds of things? And he had a passion about it, and he brought up his grandchildren on a frequent basis. And so we all miss him very much here, but we have named this bill after him. This bill is the Frank Lautenberg Safe Chemical Act. And everybody's going to know how it started, because he was one who believed in fighting for the very best, but he also believed in compromise. And I'll never forget when Senator Lautenberg, he had what I would call the perfect bill, or I guess that's the best way to describe it, the perfect bill. And he was able to pass it through the Environment and Public Works Committee, but it passed without a single Republican vote. And when it passes out of committee, it's now ready for floor time. But everybody realized without any Republicans on the bill, it wasn't going to go anywhere. And so leadership said, you know, you better go back to square one. You can't get this out of the Senate the way it's currently crafted. And to Senator Lautenberg's credit, he then took the opportunity to visit. I believe Senator Manchin was involved with this in terms of them coming together. And they started talking and saying, you know, maybe we can come up with something that's bipartisan, that it can attract people from both sides. And that was the original Lautenberg-Vitter bill, which was introduced. It immediately had, this is one of the interesting things, it immediately had 24 co-sponsors. 12 Republicans, 12 Democrats. I was one of those co-sponsors. And I think that was due, one, to the very good staff work. He had some great people on his staff, but it was due to his meeting of the minds with Senator Vitter and coming together and finding that common ground. And I remember, I'll never forget, the New York Times on that bill came out almost immediately. They had huge respect for Senator Lautenberg, and they said, you know, this is much better than current law. The Congress ought to pass this. Of course, it needs a couple of changes, and I think they mentioned 3 things in their editorial. We eventually made those 3 changes that they were talking about, but that just shows you the respect that Senator Lautenberg had, where he was able to work with everyone. He was able to convey to the media what he was trying to do, and he had tremendous support for engaging the other side. And one of the things that's helped us come such a long way is that we lost Frank, and then I joined with Senator Vitter to work on the bill. But we lost Frank, but we haven't lost Bonnie, his widow. Bonnie Lautenberg has been in this from the very beginning, wanting to see this bill become law, wanting to see that her children and grandchildren are protected. And I remember very well her speech that she gave on the floor of the Environment and Public Works Committee. She came down. Senator Inhofe was very generous in terms of saying, you know, if Senator Lautenberg's wife, Bonnie Lautenberg, wants to come down and testify this bill, we're gonna put her right up front. And she spoke eloquently at the EPW committee earlier this year and said, and this is a direct quote from what she said at that time. Frank understood that getting this done required the art of compromise. This cause is urgent because we are living in a toxic world. Chemicals are rampant in the fabrics we and our children sleep in and wear, the rugs and products in our homes and in the larger environment we live in. How many family members and friends have we lost to cancer? We deserve a system that requires screening of all chemicals to see if they cause cancer or other health problems. How many more people must we lose before we realize that having protections in just a few states isn't good enough? We need a federal program that protects every person in this country. And end quote. That's Bonnie Lautenberg testifying before the Environment and Public Works Committee. We also, earlier in the day today, had a large number of groups, which I'll talk about in a little bit, and Bonnie Lautenberg came down and spoke once again eloquently about the need to get this done for our children. And to have a tough cop on the beat that's going to look out there and analyze these chemicals, try to do the right thing when it comes to that regulatory effort, at the same time as Senator Inhofe said, working with the business community. And so it's been great having Bonnie Lautenberg work with us. I know she's feels so passionate about this, she just picks up the phone from home and calls senators and says, you know, the bill's at this particular point, we need your help. Will you take a look at it, get with your staff? And she's been quite an advocate in terms of moving this legislation along. Now, just to say a little bit about what happened earlier today, because it was really a remarkable experience to see the coming together of Democrats and Republicans, and for us to finally reach the 60 votes we need in order to break a filibuster and get the bill on the floor. We had a variety of groups represented on the public health and environmental side. My good friend Fred Krupp from the Environmental Defense Fund was there, Colin O'Mara from the National Wildlife Federation, and then we had representatives from the March of Dimes, the Humane Society, the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, Moms Clean Air Force, and other groups were there in that NGO side. We also had business leaders like former Congressman Cal Dooley, who I served with in the House of Representatives. Cal's now head of what's called the American Chemistry Council. And then there were other leaders that were also there on the business side. The Alliance of Automobile Manufacturers, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, the National Association of Manufacturers, the American Petroleum Institute. And when we got them all there and saw them together, the big question I ask is, who would have ever thought that all of these groups would be together supporting this bill and wanting this bill to move forward? And so that's one of the reasons we say to the leadership now, this bill is ready to go. It has 60 senators. We believe the actual votes would be higher than that, but clearly we have 60 co-sponsors now, and we're ready to roll here. So that's something that is very important for both the leadership on our side and the leadership on the Republican side to know that we're willing to do the hard work on the floor and willing to make sure that these kinds of issues that will arise as we move through this, that we can take care of those. Now, I want to say a little bit about, and I'm hoping that Senator Manchin or Senator Vitter will arrive at some point here because they have crucial things that they want to talk about. But people should understand the Toxic Substances Control Act of 1976 is there to protect American families, and it doesn't. There are over 84,000 known chemicals and hundreds of new ones every year. Only 5 have been regulated by the EPA, only 5 out of 84,000. And what's absolutely clear here is the American people want and deserve a government that does its job to keep families safe. That's why I rise today to urge support of the passage of the Frank R. Lautenberg Chemical Safety Act for the 21st century. Senator Vitter and I introduced this legislation for one reason, and one reason only, to bring the nation's to fix our broken nation's chemical safety laws. Ever since the EPA lost a lawsuit in 1991, it hasn't been able to regulate asbestos, a known carcinogen. And so that was one of the key things that Senator Lautenberg knew a lot about, is in 1991, so imagine 20-plus years back, the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals in a ruling said in their analysis and in their tests that they put forward, they said, the lawyers at the EPA looked at it and said, you know, we're unable to regulate asbestos now. We're unable to move forward, and no real activity has taken place since then. There's nothing that says something's more broken if an agency is unable to move forward with the regulatory activities it was set up to do. So for decades, the risks are there and were there, the dangers are there, but there's really no cop on the beat taking a look at chemical safety. The current system has failed. It fails to provide confidence in our consumer products. It fails to ensure our families and communities are safe. And there's just no doubt that reform is overdue, 40 years overdue. On this Sunday, the TSCA will be 40 years old. I see that my good friend Senator Vitter has arrived on the floor. Let me just say a moment before I introduce Senator Vitter. I couldn't have a better partner. I remember, Senator Vitter, over 2 years ago, you and I met for dinner. We talked about this bill. We said, let's work on it with each other. Let's grow bipartisan support. You've worked actively on both sides of the aisle, as I have, and we've come a long way, and we think we're ready to go. We think this bill is ready to go, and I sure appreciate the partnership that you and I have formed on this. You've been a man of your word. When you've told me you're going to do something, you do it. And that's the way we've worked through all of the issues, and we've had many issues. So, Senator Vitter, we're just to notify you, we're in a colloquy situation now till about 3:40. So I think we have about 5 more minutes of the colloquy, and then Senator Daines, I believe, has arrived, and I think he's taking time at about 3:40, unless we can persuade him to give us a minute or two. But please, Senator Vitter, and thank you for your good work on this, and you have really pulled long and hard to get the bill to this point, and we're ready to go, aren't we?
Mr. President?
The Senator from Louisiana.
Thank you, Mr. President. Absolutely, we're ready to go, and I want to join my friend and colleague, Senator Udall. I want to join the chairman of the committee, Senator Jim Inhofe, and urge all of us to come together as we have been over these many months and actually pass a good, solid, bipartisan TSCA reform effort. You know, it was over 2 years ago that I sat down with the late Senator Frank Lautenberg of New Jersey in an attempt to find compromise and work together on updating the drastically outdated Toxic Substance Control Act, what we're talking about, sometimes known as TSCA. Updating this law was a long-time goal and passion of Frank's, as has been noted, and I'm saddened that he's not here today to see it finally moving forward because he worked so hard for that. After Frank's passing, Senator Tom Udall stepped in to help preserve Frank's legacy, continue working with me to move bipartisan TSCA reform forward. But in the time since, Senator Udall and I have worked tirelessly to ensure the bill substantively addresses the concerns of our fellow Republican and Democratic colleagues, as well as concerns and ideas from industry and the environmental and public health community. If you need any evidence of this being accomplished, look no further than the 60 bipartisan co-sponsors of this bill. 60 bipartisan co-sponsors, as well as endorsements from groups ranging from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, the National Association of Manufacturers, the American Chemistry Council, the Environmental Defense Fund, the March of Dimes, and the Humane Society. The Frank R. Lautenberg Chemical Safety for the 21st Century Act was created to balance the needs of the regulatory bodies, the chemical industry, the affected stakeholders in an effective and transparent way. And our bipartisan legislation ensures that Americans will have the certainty they deserve, that the EPA is overseeing the safety of chemicals in the marketplace without stifling industry success and innovation. That work has been a long time in coming, as many of my colleagues have noted, but it's here, and now we need to move forward. We have a moment of opportunity. We need to act on it, and I urge all of us to come together here on the floor and get this done now. You know, in our work in the Senate, these opportunities don't come a dime a dozen. They don't come every day. They are here before us right now. And so I urge all of us to act. We have virtual unanimous agreement about a way to move this through the Senate on an extremely short time frame. The only issue is Senators Burr and Ayotte and their desire to have a vote on a completely unrelated piece of legislation. I am completely sympathetic to their having a vote, but we have an agreement otherwise to deal with TSCA on the floor in 2 hours and move it through the Senate. So we must take up this opportunity in an effective, bipartisan, and responsible way. And I urge all of us to do that. And I look forward to doing that in the very near future. And I thank again everybody who's worked so tirelessly on this, including my lead Democratic partner in this effort, Senator Tom Udall. With that, I yield the floor.
Senator Vitter, thank you so much. As I've said, you've been a great partner to work with on this. You've always been a man of your word. And Senator Manchin is now on the floor. I thought it would be good for him to talk a little bit about his involvement. I know he was an early co-sponsor. He was a He was a good friend of Senator Lautenberg and Senator Manchin. One of the issues we've been talking about, is this bill ready to go? But please, it's open for your comment and discussion, and please proceed.
Thank you, Senator Udall. Mr. President.
From West Virginia.
Mr. President, I rise today to speak about the bill that is long past due, and one that in part honors our dear colleague and my dear friend, Frank Lautenberg. And anybody that served with Frank knew this. He served with compassion, and he had a passion with that compassion that was unbeatable. This is one of those that he had this compassion for and the passion to get it done. I think we can all agree that the current Toxic Substance Control Act, which we know as TSCA, is inadequate and is long past due to reform the law. The Toxic Substance Control Act has not been improved in more than 30 years. I couldn't believe that when Frank explained to me the history of this piece of legislation. How this all came about and how I became involved. In 2013, I started talking to Senator Vitter, and he was working it diligently. And he told me that Frank had always been on the front and championed this thing. So I'd gone to Frank to get his input. And he said, Joe, its time has come. We've got to do something. We've got to move the ball forward. It's not going to be a perfect bill. I understand that. And I got to be honest, I've never seen a perfect bill. So we've worked on it. But Frank was willing to move it forward. Because here's the facts. In the 30 years that we've been talking about doing nothing but talking about it, 80,000 chemicals have been registered in the United States. 80,000 new chemicals have been registered, which many of us use every day. We use these unknowingly. Only 200 have undergone EPA testing. Only 200 out of 80,000. So Frank thought, very pragmatic, if you can just move the ball, can we do 20 or 30 or 40 or 50,000 of them? And that's all we were trying to do, and he knew this. There's not one person here who can question Senator Lautenberg's dedication to not only reforming the law, but also to protecting the environment and health and safety in every American. This thing got a little bit nasty, if you will, and it's to the point, was Frank really sincere about moving this forward, knowing he had to take some steps. After 30 years, I can tell you, Frank Lautenberg knew exactly what he was doing. He knew exactly that he had to make some adjustments to move the ball. That's what we're here for. Frank wanted to do that, and so we had a long talk about that, and he said, Joe, try to move it if you can. So we all got together, our staffs got together, things started to happen. And then Senator Udall became very much involved, and I appreciate it. He was on the committee and took it as a champion from there, and him and Senator Vitter sitting on that committee really made some things happen. Reforming TSCA would establish much-needed regulatory certainty for the chemical industry, which directly and indirectly employs about 40,000 West Virginians and over 800,000 people nationwide. When Senator Lautenberg met with Senator Vitter, he toughened many of the most important provisions in the law. And Senator Udall has taken up that effort, further strengthening the bill. The bill that we have before us includes increased states' rights under preemption. That was our hang-up for a long time. They worked through this, and I commend both of them to working through the preemption, to making sure that the states that basically have been out front and doing things are not going to be harmed by this. That was never the intention. It ensures that doctors, first responders, and government health and environmental officials would have greater access to confidential business information to guarantee that those potentially exposed to harmful chemicals could receive the best possible treatment. Most importantly, it contains a safety standard that, unlike current law, is based solely on human health and the environment and includes no cost-benefit analysis. Now, let me explain a personal. Freedom Industry, we had a leak of MCHM, a chemical used in a coal cleaning process in West Virginia. We had no idea what effect this chemical had on humans. Now, we have one plant, one intake on the Elk River that supplied about 300,000 homes with water. The whole valley was affected. Everybody. Don't drink it. Don't bathe in it. Don't wash. We didn't know what effect it would have. So all precautions were taken. It shut down a whole industry. It shut down a whole community. It shut down the whole city, if you will. In July of last year, I pushed the NIH and CDC to conduct further studies into the potential health impacts of crude MCHM. We just didn't know. And we had to push them, and we had to get everybody on board to tell us as quickly as they could what effect it has on our humans, to our children. Does it have any long-lasting effects? The NIH's National Toxicology Program concluded their study into crude MCHM and indicated that no long-term health effects should be expected for residents who were impacted. That was great news. But it came long after a lot of harm was done. While I'm thrilled with the findings, we shouldn't have to wait more than a year, 1 year, to get safety information on the chemicals in question. This bill that we're working on right now would require the EPA to systematically review all chemicals in commerce for the first time ever. While this will be a long process, it is far superior to the current system that allows the chemicals we use every day to go untested for health impacts on all of us. Some of my colleagues have argued the bill would be better, that this bill could be better. I assure you it could be better. Every bill we've ever passed here could have been better. But you've got to start somewhere. Frank Lautenberg knew that. After 30 years, he said, listen, enough's enough. If Frank Lautenberg would have been able, and we could have got this done 2 or 3 years later, my community, my state, 300,000 residents out of 1.8 million, wouldn't have been affected for 1 year. 1 year with the uncertainty of what effect it's going to have on them. I do know that before I decide to vote for a bill, I ask myself 3 things. Will this improve the quality of life of my constituents? Is it better than the status quo? And have we worked as hard as we can to preserve our core beliefs? For me, the Frank Lautenberg Chemical Safety Bill for the 21st Century Act is a yes on all 3. It's a win-win-win for all of us. Senator Lautenberg was an extremely smart legislator who knew it was time to move past partisan politics and craft a bill that would finally protect all Americans. This bill does that, and it does it in grand fashion. Let me just say that I think Senator Vitter summed it up. We have a little bit of a jousting going on, if you will, of where, and I understand, I sympathize with Senator Burr, Senator Ayotte, wanting to put a piece of legislation, which most of us, I think all of us support. It just maybe not the right fit for it right now, and this bill should go as clean, as much work and much time has elapsed. This bill should go clean. I truly believe that. We are committed in our energy bill coming out that we're with the LWC, the Land Water Grant. We're going to be there. We're going to fight for that. But it should be done in a different format than what this piece of legislation is being done, and how important this piece of legislation, the Frank Lautenberg legislation, he worked so hard and dedicated his life to. I want to make sure that we support this in the fashion it should be, and it is bipartisan. There's not too many things here are bipartisan, so this is one moment that we should seize and move forward for all of our constituents. And with that, Senator Udall, I commend you for the job you've done and the work you've put into this, and I know that Frank would be proud of you.
Yeah, well, Senator Manchin, I want to thank you too, because I know you've labored hard on this, and you helped the original co-sponsors get together and talk with each other and help them find common ground. And I know we both, with Senator Vitter here, we both believe we're going to have a couple of meetings now to try to move forward, as you've talked out with the bill, meet with leadership, iron out the differences, but this thing's ready to go.
Well, the bill,
and
if I may, Senator, you all worked, the preemption was the last thing hanging, right?
Yes.
That was the hardest. You've worked through that. And all of our states that had concerns about that know that they will not be usurped by preemption, that we're going to come in and say, okay, you're going to reduce you have to reduce your standards.
And the key here is that states are going to be able to participate much more. When we started with the original bill, we've worked towards more of having states participate. So I know that Senator Daines has been very generous to us and shown us great courtesies, and we've run over our time. So I'm going to yield the floor, Senator Manchin, unless you have anything else.
I'd just like to recognize Mrs. Lautenberg here to observe this historic moment, and we're so happy to have you here, Bonnie. And I know Frank would be proud of all of us trying to fight the good fight that he fought forever. And there's our good friend right there.
And Joe, earlier,
he's a champion.
Before you got here, this was the what I showed everybody, which is Frank and his grandchildren. And you know well how he always talked about his grandchildren and how
God bless.
We were supposed to legislate with grandchildren in mind. Thank you very much, Senator Daines, for your courtesies, and both you can count on me and Senator Manchin to work with you on the Land and Water Conservation Fund. You know, he's from West Virginia, but I'm from the West like you are, and I think we all believe that should move forward. Thank you very much, and yield the floor.